I remember the fog that night, like it was moving in slow, deliberate waves. The highway stretched ahead, cracked and empty, and the pale glow of my headlights barely reached the edges of the forest, pressing in from either side. Every tree seemed to shift just a little, as if it were watching me pass. I could hear the faint hum of an engine long gone, a static whisper that made the hairs on my arms rise. Somewhere in the distance, a light flickered, then vanished, leaving the road swallowed in silence. I told myself it was just a trick of my tired mind, the kind you play on yourself when you drive too late, too far from anywhere. But then, the air grew colder, heavier, and the scent of wet earth mixed with something I couldn't name. That's when I saw it. The road stretched before me, slick with the last traces of rain. Night had settled deep, and the trees pressed close along the asphalt. A chill clung to my skin, even through the thin jacket I wore. The streetlights flickered, once, twice the slow, uneven rhythm. I blinked. The next row of lights shivered in time with the first. It felt deliberate, as if the darkness was watching, waiting for me to notice. Fog rolled in like a tide, curling over the pavement. It muffled the hum of my tires and softened the world into gray shapes. Shadows shifted inside the trees, but never fully left the edge of my vision. The air smelled damp, earthy. Rotten leaves pressed into the corners of my senses. A static hum hovered far ahead, like an engine that shouldn't exist in this emptiness. I tried to focus on it, but it slipped into silence before I could pinpoint the source. My heartbeat tightened against my ribs. The flickering streetlights carved the fog into stripes of darkness and pale yellow. I could almost imagine a figure stepping from the shadows, just for a moment, then gone, leaving the fog alone to swirl. The road curved slightly. Something in the woods twisted as I passed. A movement, subtle, too quick, too fluid. I slowed. The hum came again, low, vibrating through the car. It wasn't just sound. It pressed against my chest, made the hairs along my arms lift. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing, just a fog, thick and unyielding. A branch scraped the side of my car. I jumped, swallowed by the sudden metallic taste of fear. There was no wind, no storm. Nothing should have moved. Yet something had. Something had been close. The streetlights flickered again, closer now and then farther. It became a pattern, a rhythm almost hypnotic. I tried to remember the shapes of the trees, the lines of the road, but the fog swallowed details like they had never existed. A shadow lingered just at the edge of my headlights. It shifted with every blink, slipping behind trunks, curling around the fog. I told myself it was imagination. I told myself the hum, the flicker, the moving shadow were just tricks. But the sense of being watched wouldn't leave. It sat beside me, pressed into the seat with a weight I could feel but not touch. I kept my hands on the wheel, knuckles white, eyes darting to every stretch of gray ahead. The fog thickened. The lights stuttered, then went out. I drove on, headlights the only witness. The hum vanished. The road became nothing but a stretch of black and gray, and still I felt it, the presence, patient, hovering just beyond what I could see. I slowed again. The pavement seemed slicker now. A long, pale shadow stretched across it, but there was nothing to cast it. It dissolved when I blinked. I breathed slowly, trying to calm the tight coil in my chest. The road was empty. The fog whispered at the edges of my senses. The streetlights flickered faintly, one last pulse, and then nothing. I pressed on, the hum of my own engine filling the silence. The fog rolled like waves. Shadows danced where they shouldn't, and somewhere, just beyond the reach of my headlights, I knew something was moving with me, always just beyond the light. The night air was still, almost heavy. As I set up my small camp near the abandoned off-ramp, the fog clung to the ground, curling around the roots of the trees. A faint, cold scent of damp earth rose with every breath. I thought I saw movement between the trunks, just a flicker, but the wind wasn't stirring. The branches hung still, yet the feeling of eyes, pale, reflective, staring back at me grew heavier with each glance. I froze. The rustling came again, soft at first, then louder, like something brushing against leaves, moving closer in perfect silence. I reached for my flashlight. The beam cut through the fog, shaking slightly in my grip. For a heartbeat, the forest seemed to hold its breath with me. The eyes were gone. Or maybe they were never there in the first place. I blinked, trying to convince myself it had been my imagination. The shadows twisted unnaturally. Branches bent in ways that shouldn't be possible. A faint outline lingered where the light couldn't reach. A presence crouched just beyond the edges of reality. I could feel it, the weight of its gaze pressing against my back. I turned slowly. Nothing. Only fog. Only trees. Only the soft, uneven pulse of my own heartbeat. The rustling returned, closer now, circling. It wasn't wind. It wasn't animal. It was deliberate, careful, patient. I tried to move my legs, but they felt heavy, rooted in place. The fog thickened, curling around my boots and ankles. Each whisper of movement made me flinch, made the hair along my arms stand straight. A shape passed between the trees. Too fast to be human. Too fluid to be a shadow. I blinked, and it was gone again. The forest exhaled in silence. I wanted to call out. My voice caught in my throat. Even in the quiet, I could feel it watching, waiting. The flashlight wavered in my hands. The fog shifted with every pulse of light, revealing nothing and then everything. For a moment, the eyes reappeared, glimmering like pale moons. Then a branch snapped behind me. I jumped, spinning around. Silence. Only the soft, oppressive weight of the fog. I forced my breath to slow. The forest seemed to lean closer with every heartbeat. The rustling now just a whisper, but it moved in time with me, never fully letting go. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't dare close my eyes. The pale light of the fog forest pressed in from all sides. The eyes, or the memory of them, lingered at the edge of vision, and I knew, somehow, that they had not left. They were waiting, always waiting. The highway stretched empty beneath the pale glow of my headlights. Fog curled along the edges of the asphalt, hiding the shoulders and trees. The air was damp and smelled faintly of wet tar and distant pine. I saw a figure in the distance, standing by the side of the road, a thumb raised, silent, still. I slowed instinctively, squinting through the thickening fog. As I approached, the figure shifted, blurred. A mist seemed to pour from it, softening the edges, and then it was gone. The road felt longer now, darker, each mile echoing under my tires. The fog pressed closer, curling around the car, wrapping the world in muted gray. I tried to convince myself it had been a trick of the fog, a shadow shaped by my own exhaustion. But then I heard it, a soft whisper, my name. I stopped the car. The fog thickened. Every tree became a possible hiding place. Every shadow stretched too far, lingered too long. I peered into the rearview mirror. Nothing, only the road dissolving behind me in swirling mist. The air felt heavy, almost warm against my skin, but it carried a subtle static, like electricity in a storm. I could sense the presence again, just at the edge of sight, hovering in the gray between trees. The silence pressed against my ears. Every heartbeat was loud, echoing inside my skull. I blinked, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw the figure again, standing just beyond the reach of my headlights. It did not move like a person. The edges of its form were soft, curling, blending into the fog. I called out softly, almost a whisper, but only my own voice returned. The tires hummed against the asphalt, and the road seemed to stretch endlessly forward. Every curve, every slight incline felt wrong, like the highway itself was shifting beneath me. I thought of turning around. I thought of going back. But the fog swallowed the lane behind me, and I realized there was no clear path back anymore. The whisper came again, softer this time, more insistent. A breath against my ear, though I was alone. The figure, if it ever was real, was moving with me, just beyond perception. I drove on. The fog thickened. The trees blurred. Shadows flickered in the distance. Every turn seemed the same as the last. And in the quiet hum of my engine, I felt the unmistakable weight of being followed, though the highway was empty. I couldn't tell if I had seen the hitchhiker, or if the fog had shown me something that was always there, Something that knew my name. Something that would not let me go. The service road was forgotten, cracked and overgrown, swallowed in a thick blanket of fog that clung to the trees. The air smelled damp and earthy, with hints of moss and decay. I walked slowly, boots crunching on broken gravel. Soft voices drifted through the mist, almost too quiet to hear. Each whisper seemed to carry my name, curling around the fog like smoke. I stopped. The fog pressed closer, wrapping my shoulders, my arms. Leaves shivered above me, though the air was still. The sound came again, gentle, teasing, insistent. I couldn't see where it came from. The mist was thick, twisting around the trunks of the trees, turning every shadow into a shape that might move. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, each pulse sinking with the rustle of unseen leaves. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn back. But something drew me deeper into the fog. A branch snapped nearby. I jumped, blinking into the gray. Nothing, just the whispers circling closer, following the rhythm of my steps. The fog shifted around me, dense and almost alive. Every outline of the forest blurred, and the voices became clearer, soft syllables murmuring in the spaces between heartbeats. I held my flashlight out, the beam trembling through the swirling white. Nothing answered the light. Nothing moved except the fog itself. I could feel it, pressure at the edges of sight, a presence patient waiting. The whispers circled, curling around my chest, my ears, my throat. I stepped forward. The fog thickened until I could barely see my own hands. The voices were louder now, but still distant, never close enough to touch, never revealing their source. I tried to focus on the gravel beneath my feet. On the trees I could barely make out, but the mist dissolved every line, every edge. And still, I felt the forest leaning closer, watching, breathing, waiting. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. But when I turned, there was nothing, only fog, endless and white, wrapping me in quiet tension. I forced myself to breathe slowly, letting the mist cling to my skin, letting the whispers drift past like smoke. And in the hollow silence that followed, I realized I could not tell where the voices ended and where I began. The fog had claimed everything, and I was not alone. The highway opened into a small clearing. There, an old gas station stood, windows cracked, paint peeling, its pumps rusted and motionless under the dim glow of a flickering light. I parked at the edge of the lot. The air smelled of mildew and gasoline, heavy and sour. A chill slid along my spine as I stepped onto the cracked pavement. The lights inside the building flickered, though there was no power. Shadows shifted across dusty shelves, bending and stretching in ways that shouldn't be possible. I moved closer, boots crunching on broken glass and gravel. A chair rocked slowly by itself near the counter. It stopped when I drew near, then shifted again when I looked away. The silence pressed in, thick as fog. Even my own breathing seemed loud, echoing in the empty space. I could feel the walls leaning inward, as though the station itself was watching. I ran my fingers over a shelf coated in dust. The grains crumbled at my touch. A faint creak came from the back room, though no door moved. A shadow brushed across the far window. I held my breath. It lingered for a heartbeat, then vanished, leaving only the flickering glow behind. The air smelled colder now, damp and metallic. I could hear a soft scratching, like claws on wood, echoing from somewhere deep inside the station. I stepped carefully toward the entrance. Each footfall sounded heavier than the last. The chair rocked once more, slowly, deliberately, and then stopped. I leaned against the counter, trying to steady my heartbeat. Dust motes floated in the faint light, moving in strange patterns as if stirred by unseen fingers. I wanted to leave, to escape the oppressive stillness. But curiosity anchored me in place. I could sense a presence lingering behind the cracked windows, watching, patient. The flickering lights cast long, trembling shadows across the floor. I whispered to myself, almost inaudibly, try to remind myself that I was alone. And for a moment, I believed it. But then the chair creaked again, slowly, softly, and I realized I never really had been. The car hummed quietly as I drove through the fog-thickened night. The windshield blurred with moisture, and the world beyond was soft and gray. The scent of wet asphalt mixed with pine, heavy and cold. The radio crackled suddenly, breaking the silence. Static filled the cabin, sharp and biting in my ears. A voice emerged, low and uneven, whispering directions I didn't understand. Left, right, stop. Each command carried a weight that pressed against my chest. The fog swirled outside, curling around the trees like a living thing. Branches bent in strange patterns under its weight. I blinked, and the voice was gone, leaving only static. I strained my ears, hoping it had been a trick, but the hum of the fog felt alive, vibrating with the rhythm of the whispered words. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles whitening, and the lights of the highway flickered in the thick mist. The world became soft edges and shadows, each turn of the road stretching longer than it should. Another whisper returned, closer now, breathy and deliberate, following me from behind the radio. It wasn't just sound. It carried intention, guiding, teasing, almost like it knew the road better than I did. The fog pressed against the windshield, dripping cold droplets onto the glass. Every tree leaned toward the road, as if watching my every move. The voice stopped abruptly, leaving only the harsh static and my shallow breathing. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice caught in my throat, swallowed by the fog and the echo of my own pulse. The car felt smaller, tighter, trapped in a cage of mist and shadows. I looked to the side, and the trees blurred unnaturally. Something, or someone, was moving just beyond perception. I could feel it watching from the gray, following the directions, waiting for me to obey. The static hummed again, soft this time, a low vibration that filled the cabin and pressed into my chest. I blinked, and the road stretched endlessly ahead, the fog curling and twisting around the headlights. Each pulse of static, each whisper left me unsure of what was real. The fog, the trees, the voice, they all blended together. And somewhere in the blurred gray, I felt the presence move with me, patient, silent, unseen, always just beyond the reach of the light. The forest was dense and quiet, fog weaving between the trunks like smoke. My footsteps sank softly into the damp earth, each step swallowed by the muffled hush of the trees. Then I saw it. Leaning against a gnarled trunk, a large mirror, cracked and mottled with age. Its surface caught the pale light of the fog, throwing flickers across the forest floor. I stepped closer, curiosity tugging at me. My reflection appeared, then hesitated, twitching unnaturally as if it were alive on its own. I froze. I blinked. The reflection didn't move with me. It smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of lips that I had not made. The fog thickened, curling around my boots, soft and cold against my skin. Every sound was muted. My breathing, the distant rustle of leaves, even the snap of a twig underfoot seemed swallowed whole. I reached out tentatively. The mirror was cold, slick with condensation. My fingers brushed the surface. The smile widened. I stumbled back. The fog clung closer, muffling the echo of my heartbeat. Shadows stretched unnaturally, following the mirror's gaze. I could feel a presence behind it, patient, watching, waiting for me to look away. The forest seemed to pulse with the rhythm of my pulse, each inhale and exhale mirrored by the subtle sway of branches. The mirror's cracks fractured my reflection into pieces, but the smile remained whole. I wanted to leave, to tear my eyes from that impossible grin, but curiosity anchored me in place. The fog thickened further, swallowing the path behind me. I took another cautious step forward. My reflection leaned closer than I had, tilting its head with deliberate intent. The forest air was colder now, wet with the scent of moss and decay. I felt the edges of the fog brush my face, soft, almost caressing, yet holding a weight I could not see. I turned my eyes away briefly, and when I looked back, the mirror had shifted slightly, its surface trembling like it breathed. I backed away slowly, fog curling around my ankles, shadows moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. The forest swallowed my footsteps as I left, the cracked mirror fading into the gray. But the smile lingered in my mind, etched into the fog, watching, always watching. The path was narrow, overgrown and quiet. Fog hung thick among the trees, curling around roots and fallen branches. Each step I took pressed into damp earth, swallowed instantly by silence. Then I heard them, soft, deliberate footsteps behind me, not matching my pace, but mirroring it, a quiet echo that refused to fade. I quickened my own steps. The sound followed, patient, measured. I turned slowly, eyes scanning the gray mist, but the path was empty. The forest seemed alive, holding its breath. Leaves shivered without wind. Shadows stretched unnaturally, curling around the trunks. Every sound I made, breath, footfall, heartbeat, was louder than it should have been. I ran a short distance. The footsteps quickened too, silent but impossible to ignore. I stopped again. The mist pressed close, soft and cold against my skin. Still, nothing moved except the sound behind me. I whispered my own name, half hoping for a reply. The footsteps continued, deliberate, closer now. The forest hush deepened, as though it was waiting for me to panic. I turned, scanning the fog for shapes, but the gray swallowed everything whole. Every tree became a possible hiding place, every shadow a form that might step forward. I tried to calm my breathing, forcing myself to focus on the path underfoot, but the footsteps were relentless, moving with me, always just behind, never revealing themselves. A branch snapped nearby. I flinched. The sound echoed off the fog, but the footsteps behind me never faltered. I ran again, heart pounding, feet slipping in the damp soil. The mist seemed to thicken with every desperate step, curling around my legs, my arms, pressing in. And then I stopped. The forest was still. The footsteps vanished. Only the fog remained, curling and shifting, as if it had absorbed them completely. I waited, holding my breath, every sense straining. And I knew, even in the silence, the forest had not forgotten. The path felt alive, watching, waiting, always waiting. The roadside grew quiet as I drove, the fog curling around the trees like smoke. Then, through the gray, a house appeared, run down, dark, its windows staring like empty eyes. The doors were slightly ajar, creaking faintly in the still air. I stepped onto the cracked walkway. The air smelled of damp wood and decay, thick and clinging to my clothes. Each step echoed softly, swallowed immediately by silence. The door groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, dust hung heavy, coating the floor and shelves. Furniture shifted subtly, almost as if it had been touched in my absence. The faint creak of a floorboard sounded behind me, though no one was there. A pale light flickered upstairs. It pulsed softly, illuminating shapes in the gloom. I felt the house's presence lean closer, watching, patient, aware of my every breath. I walked cautiously through the rooms. The air was colder now, moist and metallic on my tongue. Shadows lingered in corners, stretching beyond the walls, distorting reality in the dim light. A chair shifted slightly in the living room, then stopped the moment I looked at it. I tried to steady my breathing, but the hollow quiet of the house pressed against my chest. The floorboards creaked again, lightly, in a pattern I couldn't follow. The pale light flickered once more, revealing glimpses of shapes that seemed aware of me. I froze, wanted to look away, but something held my gaze, drawing me deeper into the hollow spaces. I moved toward the staircase, each step careful, deliberate. The walls seemed to lean inward, the shadows curling like smoke around the banister. I could feel the house exhaling around me, every room alive with patience and quiet menace. I reached the top landing. The flickering light pulsed stronger here, casting long, trembling shapes across the walls. I wanted to leave, but something anchored me in place, an invisible weight that made turning back feel impossible. The air smelled damp, earthy, and a faint hint of rusted metal. A whisper drifted, almost imperceptible, catching at the edges of my awareness. I held my breath, listening, but the house did not reveal itself. The hollow quiet pressed in, the flickering light slowed, then pulsed once more. I took a step back. The shapes receded. The air softened. I left the house slowly, its presence lingering, patient and watchful, as though the walls themselves remembered me. And as I stepped back into the fog, I knew the hollow house would wait, always waiting. The overpass rose high above the highway, its concrete edges slick with fog and moisture. The world below was muffled, distant, as if swallowed by the gray silence. I stepped onto the walkway, boots pressing softly against damp stone. Fog curled around the railings, twisting like smoke through the gaps. Each breath was cold, carrying the faint scent of wet asphalt and pine. Then I saw it, a shadow, moving too fluidly to be human. It slipped along the far railing, its edges blending into the swirling fog. I blinked. It was gone. The wind, or maybe the absence of wind, pressed against me. Leaves and debris twirled softly around the overpass. The echo of distant screams, or perhaps the wind, made me freeze. The fog twisted, curling in shapes that seemed alive. I stepped forward cautiously. Every footfall sounded too loud, bouncing off the empty concrete, returning to me distorted and cold. The shadow returned briefly, sliding along the railing with a speed that made the world pause. It had no features, only movement, a fluid darkness that the fog could not contain. I held my breath, listening. The silence pressed closer, broken only by the soft hum of distant traffic far below. It felt endless, oppressive. Watching. The fog swirled around my legs, curling higher, soft and cold, dampening sound, hiding edges. The shadow drifted again, impossibly fast, then paused, waiting, patient, just beyond the limits of perception. I wanted to leave, but the way back seemed farther. The fog thickened, and the overpass stretched unnaturally. The air smelled damp, metallic, heavy. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Every step forward echoed in the silence. Every glance toward the shadow made it ripple with motion. I walked slowly, carefully, the way of the fog and the shadow pressing in from all sides. The world narrowed to gray, cold, and still. And when I finally reached the end of the overpass, the shadow was gone. Only the fog remained, curling and drifting. I exhaled softly, but the feeling lingered, the sense of being observed by something too fluid, too patient to ever leave, always there just beyond the fog. The headlights cut through the fog, pale and trembling. The road stretched ahead, slick with rain, edges fading into a soft, gray nothingness. As I drove, the asphalt seemed to crumble beneath the wheels. Lines I had trusted disappeared, swallowed by mist. The world narrowed to the strip of road beneath the headlights, fog pressing close from all sides. I tried to focus on the familiar curves, but the highway stretched unnaturally, lengthening with each passing second. Every mile felt borrowed from somewhere else. The hum of the tires echoed against nothing, soft but insistent, like the heartbeat of the road itself. I blinked, and the fog thickened, swallowing the edges of the lane and the trees beyond. Panic began to rise, coiling in my chest, tight and cold. The headlights flickered, stuttering in the mist. I gripped the wheel harder, knuckles white, but the road didn't answer. I glimpsed shapes at the edges of vision, shadowed forms bending with the fog, shapes that seemed to stretch and twist along the asphalt. I blinked. They were gone. Every turn led me to the same point, the same crumbling line beneath the pale light. I told myself it was fatigue, that the fog and darkness had tricked my eyes. But my stomach twisted in a slow, cold spiral of doubt. The mist clung to the windshield, soft and thick, smelling damp, earthy, unyielding. It curled around the mirrors, the headlights, the tires, pressing against the car as if to hold me in place. I slowed, cautiously, watching the edges dissolve. The road beneath seemed fragile, fading under fog. I tried to will it to appear, but each heartbeat only revealed more emptiness, more gray, more impossible space. The hum of my engine sounded hollow, echoing through the mist. I realized then I may never reach the end. The road was endless, infinite in its gray embrace. The fog swirled and drifted, soft, patient, and I drove on, swallowed by it, heartbeat sinking with the pulsing mist, my headlights flickering into nothing. And still, somewhere beyond sight, something moved with me, always there, always patient, always watching. The forest was thick and silent, fog curling between the trees like smoke. The damper smelled faintly of moss and wet leaves. Each step I took pressed softly into the undergrowth, swallowed immediately by the hush. Then I saw it, a soft light hovering between the trunks. A lantern, swinging gently, though no one held it. Its pale glow flickered across the fog, illuminating shapes that didn't belong. I walked closer, curiosity tugging at me. The humming started then, low and subtle, vibrating through the mist. It wasn't wind. It wasn't animal. It was deliberate, almost sentient, filling the space around me. The fog swirled with my steps, curling around ankles and wrists. The lantern moved as I approached, but it did not recede. It hovered, patient, inviting, yet chilling in its stillness. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground. Branches leaned closer, brushing my shoulders in soft, dry whispers. The hum grew louder, vibrating in my chest, matching the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I blinked. The lantern seemed impossibly close, yet just out of reach. I could smell faint smoke, damp wood, and something colder underneath, metallic and earthy. The forest pressing on all sides, alive, breathing, watching. I stepped toward the light. The humming intensified slightly, vibrating through my fingertips as if I could touch it. The fog swirled faster, wrapping the world in gray and pale illumination. I stopped. The lantern swung gently, not swaying with the wind. No one stood behind it, yet the light felt alive, deliberate. It pulsed softly, matching my pulse, holding me in place. I took a deep breath, the cool air brushing my face, tasting faintly of rain and earth. Curiosity and unease tangled together, each heartbeat drawing me closer, each step pressing against the unknown. I glanced around. The trees were still, the fog soft and oppressive, the shadows static yet alive. The lantern's glow lingered in my vision, and the hum whispered at the edge of thought, soft, patient, insistent. I could have reached for it. I could have stepped closer. But the fog wrapped tighter. The humming held me back, and I realized some things in the forest were never meant to be touched. The lantern swung gently in the gray, and I walked on, the memory of its pale glow etched into the fog, always lingering, always watching. The road stretched on, empty beneath the pale glow of my headlights. Fog drifted slowly, curling across the asphalt, soft and thick. The air smelled damp, faintly metallic, and pressed cold against my skin. Then I saw it, a figure sitting silently in the passenger seat. I blinked. When I looked again, it was gone. The seat was empty. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. I glanced at the window. My reflection stared back, smiling faintly, though I hadn't moved my lips. The fog outside drifted unnaturally slow, wrapping around the car like a living thing. Every shadow seemed heavier, closer, pressing against the glass. I forced my breathing slow, deep, but each exhale felt loud, echoing in the small cabin. The seat remained empty. The reflection remained smiling. I tried to convince myself it had been fatigue, the trick of headlights and fog, but the presence lingered, patient and unseen, riding with me, just beyond perception. The world narrowed to gray and glass. The faint scent of damp pine mixed with the cold leather of the seat. The fog swirled, curling around the edges of the windshield, pushing the shadows closer. A soft shiver ran down my spine. The reflection blinked, slowly, deliberately, a motion I hadn't made. I looked away, then back. The passenger seat remained empty. The smile lingered. The fog drifted. The silence pressed in, dense and unyielding. And in that quiet, I knew the road was no longer just mine. Something had entered with me, unseen, patient, watching every turn, every pulse of the fog. Always there, always beside me, just beyond the reach of light. The trail was overgrown, tangled with roots and fallen leaves. Fog clung to the ground, curling around my boots with every step. The air smelled damp and earthy, cold against my skin. Then I heard it, branches snapping nearby. Soft, deliberate, close enough to make me freeze. No wind moved the trees. No animal stirred. I paused, heart tightening. The snapping came again, closer, echoing in the quiet. I tried to convince myself it was a fallen branch, but the rhythm, it matched the steps of something unseen. I held my breath. The fog twisted between the trunks, hiding shapes I could barely see. A whisper brushed against my ears, soft and deliberate. It spoke my name. I swallowed hard. Every sense strained to the edge of fear. The branches rustled again, closer, deliberate, as if something was circling, stalking, waiting. I stepped forward slowly, boots crunching softly against damp leaves. The sound mirrored my steps. Every snap of a twig behind me was timed perfectly, matching my pace. The forest pressed in from all sides. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the gray fog. The air smelled colder now, metallic and wet. The unseen presence moved with me, patient, silent, deliberate. I want to call out. My voice caught in my throat. The fog wrapped around my legs, soft and heavy, swallowing the trail I had just walked. A branch snapped sharply, right behind me. I spun. Nothing. Only fog, gray and swirling, curling around the trees, around me, wrapping me in quiet dread. I forced my breathing to slow, but the rustling continued, circling, following, waiting. I walked on, each step careful, deliberate, fog thickening around my shoulders, the forest alive and patient, its unseen eyes tracking me. And in the silence that followed, I knew the presence had not left. It was with me, always circling, always waiting, just beyond the edge of sight. The highway curved sharply, disappearing under a long abandoned tunnel. Its entrance was dark and cold, dampness rising from the cracked concrete. The air smelled of wet stone and rust, heavy and stagnant. I stepped inside, boots echoing softly against the uneven floor. Drips of water fell rhythmically from the ceiling, each one a sharp note in the hollow silence. Shadows danced along the walls, twisted and slow. The fog from outside drifted in, curling like smoke through the tunnel. Each breath I took felt colder, sharper, pressing against my chest like icy fingers. Then I heard it, footsteps echoing softly behind me. I froze. I was alone. The tunnel swallowed sound, yet the steps repeated, deliberate, patient. I turned slowly. Nothing. Only shadows stretching along the damp walls, rippling as though alive. The rhythm of the drips seemed to sync with my heartbeat, faster now, anxious, tight in my chest. I stepped forward, carefully, every movement deliberate. The fog thickened, clinging to my clothes and skin. The echoes followed me, soft but impossible to ignore. I whispered my own name, half hoping for reply. The air pressed close, cold and damp, and the shadows pulsed at the edges of perception. A sudden creak, faint but deliberate, made my stomach twist. I glanced back. Nothing, only the fog, curling around crack walls, hiding shapes I could not name. I forced myself to keep moving, the tunnel stretching endlessly ahead. Each step sounded heavier, the echoes distorting, turning familiar stone into something foreign, alive. The drip of water continued, soft but insistent, like a heartbeat not my own. The shadows shifted with impossible speed, and I realized I was being followed, though nothing touched me and no one spoke. I exhaled slowly, the cold air burning my lungs. I could feel the weight of the tunnel pressing close, its patient, silent presence watching, waiting. Every step forward pulled me deeper, and the echoes behind promised that I was never truly alone. The tunnel swallowed my footsteps, but not the dread. It lingered, patient and waiting, as I moved toward the unknown. Rain poured steadily, drumming softly against the hood of the car. The road glistened under the headlights, black and slick, stretching endlessly into the gray. The air smelled of wet asphalt and damp earth, sharp and heavy. I stopped by the roadside, letting the wipers sweep in vain against the sheets of rain. A puddle formed beneath the tires, murky and still. I leaned slightly, peering into it, and froze. My reflection didn't mimic my movements. It lagged behind, twitching unnaturally, as if watching me rather than copying me. Then I saw it. A figure crouching behind me in the puddle, distorted by the ripples, pale and soft-edged. I turned quickly. Nothing. Only rain, falling steadily, washing the world in gray. The air was colder now, damp and metallic. Every footstep on the wet gravel sounded unnaturally loud, echoing against the night. I glanced back at the puddle. The figure remained, crouching in the reflection, its eyes fixed, patient, waiting. I stepped closer. The reflection flinched in ways my body did not. The rain drummed harder, each drop sounding like a soft tap against my skin. The world outside became a blur, fog and gray, but the puddle held its own strange clarity. I wanted to step away, to leave, but something in the reflection anchored me in place. The crouching figure did not move, did not speak, but I could feel its presence pressing against me, cold, wet, and patient. I blinked. The puddle rippled with my motion, and for a fleeting moment, the figure seemed to lean closer. I stepped back, the reflection distorted, twisted, but the eyes remained fixed on me. The rain softened, dripping slowly now, but the chill lingered on my skin. The world seemed smaller, the night heavier, and the reflection whispered only in silence, its gaze following every twitch, every breath. I left the roadside, the puddle, and the crouching figure fading behind me. But the memory stayed, etched into the foggy rain, a presence that did not vanish, always there, just beyond the reach of my reflection. The highway stretched empty beneath the pale glow of my headlights. Fog rolled in thick, curling around the edges of the road, soft and cold. The air smelled damp and earthy, heavy with night. I saw a figure standing silently on the shoulder. No movement beyond stillness, no words, only the faint outline of a person waiting. I slowed and stopped. The figure stepped closer to the car, eyes fixed on me, unblinking, patient. I opened the door slowly. They didn't speak, not a single word, just stared, silent and still, their presence pressing against the edges of the fog. I glanced away briefly, and when I looked back, the back seat was empty. The fog outside drifted unnaturally slow, curling around the car like a living thing. I could feel the weight of those silent eyes lingering, as if the presence had entered with me, moving just behind my awareness. Every reflection in the glass seemed altered. Shadows flickered in impossible ways, stretching and twisting along the edges of the seat. The air smelled faintly metallic now, mixed with damp earth and something else, something intangible, patient, waiting. I gripped the wheel tighter, the hum of the tires echoing unnaturally in the thick fog. The figure remained in memory, its silence louder than any words could be. I tried to convince myself it had vanished, that the fog had swallowed it entirely. But the weight lingered. The quiet presence followed, always just beyond the reach of sight. I drove on. The headlights cut through the gray. Every curve of the road felt deliberate, measured, as if the world itself was aware who had been in the car. And somewhere in the folds of fog and shadow, I knew the silent hitchhiker was still there, watching, waiting, always there, always patient, just beyond the edge of perception. The highway curved softly, disappearing into thick, rolling fog. The air was damp, smelling faintly of wet pine and asphalt. Every sound, my tires, my breathing, the hum of the engine, was muted, swallowed by the gray silence. A sign appeared at the side of the road. Its paint was faded, letters barely visible, showing a destination I didn't recognize. Curiosity tugged at me. I turned, following the direction it indicated. The road narrowed, edges softening under the heavy fog. The trees leaned closer, branches brushing the windshield, shadows stretching unnaturally with the curve of the highway. The clearing ahead began to emerge slowly through the mist. It was unfamiliar, isolated, thick with fog and silent shapes. The air smelled colder now, damp, metallic, pressing against my skin. I slowed, trying to make sense of space, but the fog made everything uncertain. Shadows move at the edge of perception. Nothing concrete, just shapes bending and shifting with the swirling mist. The world felt deliberate, waiting for me to step further. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Nothing followed, yet the feeling persisted, a presence hovering just beyond vision, patient and still. I stepped out of the car, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot loud in the quiet. The clearing was empty, yet the fog seemed thicker, curling like smoke between the trees. Shapes lingered in the gray, unformed but aware. A soft, cold breeze brushed my neck, carrying whispers that barely reached the ears, almost drowned by the silence pressing in from every direction. I wanted to turn back, to follow the familiar highway, but the fog had closed around the road I came from. The trees bent closer, the shadows waiting, the clearing stretching, unfamiliar, impossible. I realized then that the sign had led me here intentionally, to this place that existed only in the folds of fog and shadow. And somewhere in that gray, I knew something watched, patient, unmoving, waiting for me to step further into the unknown. The fog swallowed the edges of the clearing, and I walked on, curiosity and dread twisting together, the silent presence always just beyond the reach of sight. The road narrowed as I drove, fog curling along the edges like smoke. The night smelled damp and earthy, cold against my skin, each breath heavy with the weight of still air. In the distance, a house glowed faintly. Its windows held a pale, trembling light, casting shapes across the fog that seemed almost aware of me. I slowed, drawn forward despite the unease curling in my chest. The lights flickered within, illuminating furniture that shifted subtly, as if touched by unseen hands. The air was colder here, carrying a faint scent of mildew and wood rot. I could feel the stillness pressing against my ears, the silence thick, expectant, waiting. I stopped the car. The headlights carved weak paths through the mist, and the fog wrapped around the house, curling like smoke around unseen corners. I stepped out, boots sinking softly into the damp grass. The faint light pulsed, gentle and deliberate, drawing my gaze, anchoring me in place. Shapes moved behind the windows, barely perceptible, soft forms that lingered, watching, shifting with the glow. I hesitated, unable to look away, heart thudding in the still night. The fog swirled around my legs, soft and damp. The air felt alive, watching, breathing with me. Each flicker light cast shadows that moved differently than they should, stretching, bending toward the edge of the fog. I wanted to step back, to retreat, but my feet felt rooted, caught in the pull of the pale glow. Every instinct screamed to leave, yet something anchored me there, curiosity intertwined with dread. The shapes shifted again, almost deliberately, aware of my presence, silent, patient. The faint flicker continued, pulsing softly like a heartbeat I could not hear. I stepped back slowly, the fog curling around me, but the house remained, its pale light reaching through the gray, watching, waiting, aware of every motion. I returned to the car, the fog swallowing my footsteps, but the memory of the windows lingered, soft and insistent, a quiet presence that would follow me beyond the road. The forest closing around me, dense and silent, fog curling between the trees like slow, curling smoke. The air was cold, damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. At first, it was subtle. The branches shifted slightly, the leaves trembling. Then I realized the forest was moving in rhythm. It was breathing, inhaling and exhaling around me. Each pulse of fog matched the beat of my heart. My footsteps pressed softly into the damp ground, but the forest seemed aware, watching, waiting, its presence curling closer with every breath I took. Shadows shifted in impossible ways, stretching along the trunks and curling around the undergrowth. Every sound I made, breath, movement, heartbeat, echoed oddly, swallowed and returned in warped waves. I tried to convince myself it was imagination, that the fog and darkness were tricking my senses. But the rhythm was too deliberate, too patient. The forest itself pulsed around me, alive in ways I could not name. I stepped forward cautiously. The fog clung to my legs, curling higher, soft and cold, damp against my skin. The trees leaned inward, branches brushing the edges of vision, shadows bending with the movement of the unseen air. Every inhalation, every exhalation of the forest seemed timed to me, as if it knew my heartbeat, my rhythm, tracking, patient, aware. I whispered my own name. The forest answered with silence, and a pulse in the fog that made my skin prickle. It was there, always there, breathing with me, around me, waiting. The path narrowed, twisting slightly, fog thickening to hide the ground beneath my feet. The forest pulse continued, soft but insistent, its presence pressing close, patient and deliberate. I realized then that I was no longer just walking through the forest. I was inside it. It knew I was here. It was alive and it was patient. I took a deep breath, the cold air biting damp against my lungs, and moved forward, the rhythm of the forest echoing in my chest, guiding, watching, breathing, always aware. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, fog curling along the edges like smoke. The air was damp and cold, smelling faintly of wet asphalt and pine. Each breath felt heavy, pressed by the soft silence of the night. Then I saw it, a pale orb drifting alongside the car. It never approached, never left, moving with impossible patience, keeping pace with me. Its soft glow illuminated shapes in the fog, flickering, fleeting figures at the edge of perception. They appeared, shifted, vanished, as though the fog itself carried them along. I slowed, watching the orb drift with the car, its light gentle but deliberate, casting shadows that twisted unnaturally across the road. The air felt colder now, damp and metallic against my skin. Every heartbeat seemed louder, echoing in the quiet cabin. The hum of tires muted beneath the weight of fog. The orb floated patiently beside me, its presence pressing softly against the edges of thought. I glanced into the rearview mirror. Nothing followed, yet the orb remained, moving with a calm persistence, as though it had been waiting for me all along. I blinked, and the figures in the fog shifted again, barely glimpsed shapes curling and twisting, aware, patient, moving with the pale light. The fog swirled closer, hugging the car, and the orb pulsed slightly, synchronizing with my pulse without sound, its gentle glow anchoring me in place. I wanted to reach for it, to step out of the car and touch the impossible, but the fog pressed in, soft and heavy, curling around my legs, my hands, my chest. The orb continued alongside, unwavering, patient. Its glow revealed fleeting glimpses of what was not quite there, shapes that shimmered, vanished, then reappeared at the edge of vision. I exhaled slowly, the cold air filling my lungs, and realized I was not alone. The light had chosen to follow, silent, deliberate, always just beyond the reach of understanding. I drove on, the orb drifting beside me, the fog alive with shadowed figures, and a quiet sense that something unseen was guiding, watching, waiting, always present, always patient, just beyond the edge of fog. The trail twisted beneath the fog, narrow and overgrown. The air was damp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and cold earth. Every step pressed softly into ground, swallowed immediately by silence. At first, the path seemed familiar. I thought I could follow it without trouble. But with every turn, it looped back on itself, folding the world in ways that felt impossible. A cabin appeared briefly, its walls gray and soft-edged in the mist. I blinked. It vanished. The fog swallowed it completely, leaving only uncertainty behind. Footsteps echoed from every direction, soft and deliberate. They did not match my pace, but mirrored it in subtle, patient ways, pressing close from the gray edges of the trail. I stopped listening. The fog pressed around me, curling like smoke through the trees. Shadows stretched and bent unnaturally, shifting with every heartbeat, every breath I took. I took a cautious step forward. The trail twisted again, impossibly looping, folding back into itself like the forest was alive, deliberate, aware of my presence. I whispered my own name. The footsteps paused for a heartbeat, then continued, circling, patient, unseen. The air grew colder, damp pressing against my skin, fog curling higher, swallowing my boots and ankles. The world had narrowed to gray and shadow, every curve of the path impossible to trust. I reached for the edge of the trail, but the fog shifted, pulling it away. The cabin, the trees, even the path itself, vanished behind a veil of gray, leaving only uncertainty and waiting. I moved slowly, deliberately, footsteps soft, heartbeat loud. The unseen presence followed, patient, circling, its attention constant, deliberate, unyielding. The trail disappeared, folded into the fog itself, and I walked on, trapped in a loop, aware the path had never truly existed, and that the forest, patient and silent, had been guiding me all along, always watching, always waiting, just beyond the edge of perception. The forest was quiet, dense, and still. Fog curled between the trunks like smoke, soft and damp. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, heavy against my skin. Then I heard it, a low, continuous hum, vibrating softly through the trees. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew steadily, pressing against my chest with each breath. The leaves trembled despite the absence of wind. The fog shifted in waves, curling around roots and fallen branches, moving toward me as if guided by the sound. I paused, listening, heart quickening. The hum pulsed, deliberate, insistent, a vibration that seemed alive, patient, aware. Shadows twisted at the edges of perception. The trees leaned closer, bending into the gray, casting shapes that flickered unnaturally in the fog. I stepped forward cautiously. Each footfall pressed softly into the damp ground, but the hum followed, vibrating through the soles of my boots, through my legs, pressing into my chest. I whispered my own name. The hum responded in subtle waves, like the forest itself was alive, aware of my presence, deliberate, watching. The fog swirled faster, curling around my ankles, soft, cold, damp against my skin. Every heartbeat echoed strangely, synchronized with the hum that moved toward me. I blinked, and the shapes in the trees shifted. Nothing solid, nothing real, yet the presence was unmistakable, patient, deliberate. The hum pressed closer, vibrating through the air, through the fog, into the forest itself. I could feel it in every step, every breath, every pause. I moved on carefully, deliberately, the hum lingering, circling, patient, the forest alive with quiet intention, watching, waiting, guiding, always near, always patient, just beyond the edge of hearing, just beyond perception. I returned to my car, the fog curling thickly around the tires and asphalt. The air smelled damp and metallic, cold against my skin. Every sound, my footsteps, the hum of the engine, even my breath, felt amplified in the gray silence. Then I saw it, a figure, just beyond the rear window, shifting softly in the fog. I froze, heart tightening. It didn't move like a person, its edges blurred, almost part of the mist itself. I approached slowly, each step soft on the wet ground. When I reached the car and opened the door, the figure vanished. The fog pressed closer, curling around my legs, my arms soft and heavy. I could feel its presence lingering, patient, deliberate, watching from where it had been. I glanced inside the cabin. Nothing had changed. The seats were empty. The mirrors reflected only my own anxious face. Yet the sense of being observed remained, settling into the corners of vision, just beyond the glass. I circled the car, soft footsteps muted by the fog. Every shadow seemed to shift unnaturally, stretching toward me, bending with the mist. The forest, the night, the gray haze, they all felt alive, aware of me, deliberate, patient. I exhaled slowly, the cold air biting my lungs. The fog drifted, soft and thick, swallowing the road behind me. The figure never returned, but the memory of its presence pressed against me. Like the edges of the world had been altered. I slid into the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel. The mist clung to the windshield, curling and twisting. I started the engine. Every heartbeat echoed. Every breath trembled, and the sense of being followed lingered. The figure was gone, yet the road, the fog, the night itself, all whispered the same truth. I was never alone. Always watched, always patient. Just beyond the edge of vision, the highway stretched endlessly into gray, fog curling around the edges like smoke. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and cold earth. Every breath felt slow, deliberate, swallowed by the stillness. I drove on. The fog never lifted, pressing close, curling around the tires and the car like a living thing. Shadows flickered at the edges of vision, dancing, twisting, always just out of reach. Every turn led to the same place. The road seemed infinite, folding over itself in impossible loops. I blinked, and a familiar strip of asphalt stretched further, never ending, never resolving, swallowing the horizon. The hum of the engine was muted beneath the heavy silence. Every heartbeat echoed in my chest, matching the rhythm of the fog curling along the road. I tried to trace the lines, to find an end, a turn, anything familiar, but there was nothing. I slowed, then accelerated. It made no difference. The highway repeated itself, gray and slick, stretching endlessly, edges dissolving into mist. Shadows flickered in the periphery. Shapes moved just beyond the fog, always following, never approaching, always patient, always waiting. I realized then There was no destination, no end, no exit, only this eternal stretch of road, folding and repeating beneath the fog. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of it all. The fog pressed close, the shadows lingered, and the infinite highway moved with me, pulling me deeper, patient, deliberate, unyielding. I thought about stopping, but even the act of pausing seemed swallowed, erased by the fog and the soft, relentless rhythm of the road. And so I drove, through gray, through mist, through shadows. The highway stretched onward, infinite, patient, aware. I would drive forever, and the fog, the shadows, the road itself would watch, always,